perfect physique doesn't exist, but chasing it can destroy your relationship with food, training, and your body. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris 2. They call me P2. I'm a nutrition and fitness coach, and I work primarily with weight class athletes on performance nutrition. Now, I have been an athlete for decades, and I've competed in rugby, in Muay Thai, and in bodybuilding. A lot of what I'm going to be covering in this video is very, very personal, as well as with conversations I've had with peers, teammates, and clients over the years. Now, of course, obvious disclaimer, if you are struggling with severe disordered eating or an eating disorder, body dysmorphia, or thoughts of self-harm, please seek professional support immediately. Let's start with the reality. Body image and body dysmorphia, they affect everyone. It's not a discrimination. Within the whole general population, about 9% of women and about 4 to 5% of men have struggled with an eating disorder. When it comes to athletes, the risk of this is higher, actually 2 to 3 times higher. And a recent NCAA study actually found that 38% of athletes are at risk of eating disorders and 47% are at risk for low energy availability, where they're just really under eating. And of course, the higher the level of sport and the higher the pressure, unfortunately, the risk increases. Elite athletes have higher percentages of clinical eating disorders compared to the general population. When it comes to weight class sports, of course, this is a challenge because body composition is very much a part of the conversation and the competition itself. Let's define the body image problem. What is it? It's the mental and emotional relationship with your physical body. So how you see yourself, how you see your appearance, how you feel about yourself, whether you are taking your self-worth and tying it to how you look. And this is very complex in general because now we're entering the conversation of beauty standards, cultural standards. But for the purposes of our conversation, I'm trying to keep it a bit more high level and just think about like current perceptions of what fit body is compared to what one might have in a sport. Because it does get really, really complicated in this context also because as athletes, your body is a tool, like literally. And so the appearance and the function get tangled a little bit. And the facts are that the ideal doesn't exist. Chasing something that is so intangible because it evolves with us. When we're talking about our body image as athletes, the ideal just doesn't exist. We were sold this idea of what fit looks like. It's lean, it's defined, it's aesthetic. And then a lot of people like myself, we ask, in what context though? What are we talking about? You could look fit and not be fit. You could look like a fitness model and not be able to actually lift anything or run down the street. Those are metrics that don't necessarily align. The fact is, when you look at actual athletes, like powerlifters don't look like long distance runners, who don't look like swimmers, who don't look like gymnasts, who don't look like fighters. And successful athletes come in all shapes and sizes. And also when it comes to weight class sports, that's why we have weight classes. That's another debate point. But for our purposes, let's go with it. So a 77 kilogram powerlifter can look very different than a 77 kilogram mixed martial artist. And they can both be like very elite and highly competitive, but just look differently. Yet many of us still compare ourselves to some imaginary ideal. What is the psychological toll here? Well, it's just constant comparison, which is very heavy. It could be to other athletes through social media, to what you think you're supposed to look like. And then your self-worth starts to fluctuate because it's so appearance dependent. And I don't mean this in the sense that, we took a shower, brushed our hair, put on a little bit of mascara to have a little bit of confidence. And you want to present yourself a certain way. I understand that. It goes beyond where you're just tying your worth to how you look that day. And it crosses over to like obsession. So when you're obsessively body checking, when you're obsessively mirror checking, you're taking measurements constantly or checking your weight constantly, but not in a way that's intentional or like tied to a purpose. And maybe the other part of the psychological toll is that you think that you have to, you're not going to be taken seriously if you don't look a certain way. But the fact is that your body performing really well doesn't necessarily correlate to what you see in the mirror. And that can really influence what we do as athletes. So how does this actually show up in our behavior and nutrition choices? Maybe you start to manipulate food, not just for performance, but more for aesthetics. And a disclaimer here, I've been anti-diet, but pro-dieting. And what I mean by that is that there has to be some autonomy here. I really strongly believe in having education and autonomy. And if you are competing bodybuilding, if you are choosing an aesthetic goal, like you have every right to. The whole point is to just try and make it as safe as possible and to support you in it. But if you are aware of the risks and you are in a good headspace as an adult, you have every right to do that. It's different if you're like, hey, I'm competing in bodybuilding. I have a show coming up in 2 months, but you have this peace with your body and who you are as a person isn't attached to it. It's when you start to cross over again to performance and athlete situations. So you're cutting calories beyond what your training requires because you think that you're going to look leaner. You know, the under eating conversations I've had in previous episodes. You avoid foods, perhaps certain foods or like entire food groups that could support your recovery and performance for weight class athletes where there's a legitimate competition prep approach. What you're doing for competition week is not the same thing as what you're doing the rest of the time. You can't have this constant restriction to always be competition ready. Competition ready means that you are performing at your sport and you're hovering around a couple tweaks here or there and you can make weight safely. It means to actually be able to perform near your weight class, not to look like you would on the stage or like the moment that you step on a scale for a weigh-in. So then essentially you're using nutrition as a control mechanism for when you feel bad about your body. And this is further perpetuated, in the good or bad conversation I was having in a different episode. I really recommend that you watch that about clean eating. This is where I was coming from because it can be very tied to your self-worth and you're good, you're good, you're bad, you're bad. And it becomes just really heavy and a punishment. Okay, how else can it show up in behavior? In training choices. Maybe you're taking up extra conditioning, not because it can improve performance, but because you're trying to change how you look, like you're trying to burn off the calories. And then the other thing that could happen also, and I struggle with this a lot in this industry, where exercise becomes more about a punishment for how you look and what you ate. Like you have to earn or burn off something you ate, or, it's a punishment instead of the celebration of like, cool, look at what my body can do. How cool is this? How rad is it that I'm capable of doing these things? And both of them, they end up in this vicious cycle. So you can feel bad. You can feel bad about your body, restrict food or overtrain. Your performance suffers. Then you feel worse about your body and you restrict some more. Or you overeat, have a little mindless binge eating experience, feel shame, restrict, start the cycle again. It's just very vicious. And the behaviors all seem like they're going to fix something, but they're actually just perpetuating to the problem. They can make body image feel worse and impact performance and recovery. And oh my gosh, I've been there. I've done everything I've said. It's part of the main thing that is a problem is when people reinforce what is actually a problem because they're projecting their own perceptions and their own insecurities. And this is the part to be really careful of. We're going to dive into it a bit more, but I digress. Why don't athletes talk about this much? Well, they're supposed to be mentally tough and disciplined and very confident. And admitting that you struggle with body image could be seen as weakness. And in certain sports, the line between doing what your sport requires and what you signed up for can get blurry real quickly with actually struggling. And there could be like fear of judgment from peers, from coaches, from teammates, from other competitors. And that's a massive red flag. I understand if it's like other competitors, but especially in a weight class sport, there should be an opportunity for you to like speak freely with your teammates and your coaches where, you are given the tools and supported and not shamed and not ridiculed because that just kind of continues to feed that shame and we hide and hide more and it's making a problem worse. And maybe the other things also is that you, hey, I should know better or I shouldn't care about this. Like whatever, it's not important, but it is. It is. And here's a reality though. Up to 84% of college athletes have actually engaged in disordered eating or weight control behavior. This is an issue that affects basically all athletes at some point. And it is not a weakness. It's actually a response to real cultural pressures. And talking about it is what helps us break the cycle. And once again, to reiterate, I am not talking about the very hard thing of like, for example, making weight in a weight class sport. it's challenging, but you're competing because it's a choice you made and not everyone can do it. Not everyone can fight. Not everyone can compete, nor should everyone do it. But it is just, like a occupational obligation. There's a line where we have to remember we're human beings. That's what we're talking about when that line gets blurry. So what do we actually focus on, right? Shift the mindset. Body's primary job is to perform, to recover, to adapt, to stay healthy. There's so many athletes that are unhealthy. We equate that to health. Like those are not the same things. A lot of elite sports aren't actually healthy, but what we're trying to do is keep ourselves as like holistically healthy as possible, form, recover, adapt. The appearance is a byproduct, not the goal. And so what we can do is ask, hey, does my body do what I need it to do for my sport? How can I support it? And to really focus on a term called body neutrality. Now, I'm a big advocate for this specifically because I feel like either or was very extreme. And as you've noticed, if you've followed along or watched any of my stuff, I'm usually like team contacts and team, let's say in the middle, because it really depends what we're doing. In this conversation, body neutrality, you don't have to love how you look. You're allowed to have feelings that are valid, but you do have to respect what your body can do for you. So you're not necessarily tying your worth to the appearance. That's the objective of body neutrality. Okay. In your nutrition, what do? We feel for function. Does this support my training and my total daily expenditure? Does it support my training and my recovery, my performance, physically and mentally and emotionally? Question isn't, will this make me look how I think I should? 'Cause what does that mean? It's just such a not helpful way to look at it because that doesn't influence calories and macronutrients and micronutrients. This doesn't actually lend clarity. Like what do you mean? And then when it comes to weight class athletes, competition prep has to have clear timelines and purposes. In a sport like fighting in Muay Thai or in combat, there isn't a season. This is where it has to be implemented. You're not going to constantly be in competition prep. You cannot be in fight camp for a whole year. It's just not possible. And so you were having clear timelines, clear purposes, clear conversations, tensions, focusing on maintenance and building. Also, it comes with the seasons of, being in maintenance, being in surplus, recovering, being in a deficit. There's a reason that they all exist. And it's part of just a dynamic commitment to nutrition. And make sure that you're working with people who understand this and they have a lens of comprehending the stuff that you're not saying yet. And it's not to tiptoe around. It's not to walk on eggshells because we're too soft and you don't want to hurt anyone. It's to have that respectful space where we can be vulnerable and be held in safety. And then make sure that if we are struggling, that we can be directed to get actual support. It is one of the things I take most seriously. It's like, yes, for example, when it comes to fighters, of course, I want my fighters to make weight, duh. But at what cost? I'm looking for their safety. I want to make sure that they make weight, that they recover well. Also, that there's a good rehydration strategy. I'm looking at an exit strategy. I'm looking at the following weeks and months. Because as you know, my corner of the world, we're human first, athlete second. And I think that's very, very important to make sure that the people you are working with can see you as a multifaceted human being. Yes, to prioritizing your performance goals and your competition goals, but to also look out for you. I think it comes with just an obvious integrity and the bare minimum of the coaches and people that you're choosing to work with. So on that note, in your training, make sure that your program is based on performance goals that are like, hey, my strength, my skill, my conditioning, and not necessarily, again, how is this going to change my appearance? Because rest and recovery are performance tools. And we want to track metrics that also are relevant. So we're not just tracking body metrics. We could body composition and, fat mass. And they're important. It's just one metric where you are also looking at performance metrics and you're looking at it holistically, a whole of a human being. Challenge the comparison. So honestly, unfollow accounts that are all about just comparison or very show-offy in a way that doesn't feel good. Just remember that different sports require different bodies. And even in your own sport, whatever sport it is, if you look at the most elite, there is some things that they might have in common, like specific, let's say, body types. I was having this conversation with my teammates the other day about a posture of fighters. Sure. When we're talking about just the leanness and the physicality of a fit body, It also depends on training history, on genetics, circumstances, so many different things. Just keep that in mind and challenge comparison. And then create boundaries. Choose to opt out of very body-focused conversations. Like if you are sitting around with a bunch of peers and they just keep going on about their diets in a very destructive manner, why? Just don't participate. And I mentioned work with coaches who focus on what you can do and not just how you look, like the two of them combined. You don't owe anyone commentary on your body. It's actually okay to say, I don't discuss my body or my weight. And just to reiterate again here, I'm talking about Susan at the barbecue. This is a conversation you need to be having if you are competing with people that are qualified. So your coaches, your nutritionists, your trainers, but not random people that aren't part of the process, that aren't helping you with your calories and your macro targets. So if body image thoughts consume significant daily mental energy, if you are spending more time thinking about this than doing other things, perhaps it's time to seek some professional support. If you are avoiding life situations, social situations because of how you think you look, that's a problem. And again, I don't mean, hey, I have a competition coming up, I'm not going out for dinner. It is when you start to notice that this becomes a pattern, please seek professional support. If your self-worth is entirely dependent on your appearance, yeah, that's a problem because you are so much more than your body and certain things that we can't even control. I can't change that I'm 5'3¾". I'm never going to be 5'10". And so the way my body shape is, it just is what it is. And I am very grateful that I discovered rugby when I was young because I have the quadzillas of fender thighs. Great. It works with my body shape. If your nutrition and your training decisions and choices are driven primarily by appearance and anxiety, go get help. I highly recommend that you work specifically with therapists and dietitians that specialize in body image and eating disorders. If you're really, really struggling, because that is a skill set and it's out of my scope, of course, to work with someone that has an eating disorder. But the lens that I personally have when I'm working with clients is always just the human lens. You want to know some of these things, all of it at high level, because if it is out of my scope, I'm going to be the first person to say it. And I think that's really, really important. My personal approach to coaching, I call it the level up framework, and it combines nutrition and mindset and teamwork for this exact reason. Everything is connected. And so if you want some support there, please check out the description box for how to work with me one-on-one or in a group cohort. In closing, there is no perfect body. We come in all shapes and sizes, and that's why we have different sports, different interests, different weight classes. Body image struggles aren't just vanity. They can actually become real psychological challenges with real behavioral impacts that quite literally influence everything about your nutrition, your training, and your sport. Please don't dismiss them if you're struggling. That's part of the conversation. Make sure you have it with your coaches and your teammates and your peers and people that you've cultivated having a vulnerable conversation with. The mental energy spent criticizing how you look can actually go to far more productive things. Yeah, sure, look good and feel good, but to what end? And you can respect your body's functions without loving its appearance every day. Let's just normalize talking about this because the silence is what protects the culture that hurts us. If you're a person, you are worthy. It impacts all of us. Let's have more of these conversations and make sure that no one feels like they're completely alone. So I'm curious, what has been your experience with body image in your sport? Please share in the comments below and please subscribe for more human first content. Thank you so much for your attention, everyone. Catch you next time.